I'm going to talk today a little bit more about my method for what I call multi-hooping when I want to try to combine some designs together. This is Fabi Martinez, and I'm a member of this digitizing group where we are using our Hatch 2 embroidery software. What you see on my screen right now is a combined design. This is a design set that I purchased, and it was meant to be stitched out as a tile scene, which basically means that if you look closely at this design, you can see that there are several blocks. And these blocks are meant to be stitched out as individual pieces and then sewn together on the sewing machine and completing the project that way. Well, the main reason that I decided on this project that I was going to do it as not as a tile scene, but rather as a multi-hooped design was because initially I started noticing when I combined these designs together that there were some digitizing problems with it. I'm going to zoom in right here where these two blocks are supposed to be connected. And you can see that we've got a stem that's coming down right here and another stem, which is the other half of it, coming up from this direction. So what you see right here on this turquoise colored line is this is going to be the stitching line to connect these two blocks together. And as you can see very clearly, these stems would never line up because they just weren't digitized properly. There are several other places on this design set that has the same problem. So here was a spot down here where the design wasn't going to line up very well. A couple of others in different spots. But that was my first inspiration for making this into a tile scene. So this is what it looks like. I opened up all of the blocks in this size, which was going to be the 4-inch blocks that I wanted to sew together. And I combined them together onto this page of the design list. So what I did next is what you can see here is this red rectangle here is the largest hoop for my Janome MemoryCraft 15,000 machine, as well as my 12,000 machine. And if I select the hoop, the largest hoop we have for this machine is called our GR hoop. And there you can see it with the red outline on it. And it's very evident when I do that, that you can see that I would never be able to fit this entire design into one hooping. Now, what I needed to do next then was to figure out, as I look at this design, I'm going to start looking at it in the mindset of the dimension of it. So what I mean by that is what parts of this design are further back visually than the ones that are closer up visually. Now you can see that this tulip with its stem, let's zoom in on it just a little bit, comes in front of this stem. It comes in front of this set of applique leaves, etc., etc. So that's your next step, is just start to analyze your design. What things need to be stitched first because they are further back than the things that need to be stitched second or third. All right, so start looking at your design that way. The next thing you need to do is figure out, all right, now I know what's far behind and what's closer to the front. What's actually going to fit inside of my embroidery hoop that I want to use? Like I said before, I want to try to minimize hoopings. So I've got two things going on. I want to minimize hoopings, and I also want to make sure that when I've got things that are going to be overlapped, I'm going to combine those parts of the designs into one element so that they can stitch out continuously and look excellent once they are stitched out. So this is going to require some editing, sometimes some redigitizing of some of these things. I hope that's making sense to you now. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you what my end result was for this layout. In this layout right here, I've got my hoop showing, and you can see that these parts of the design, this leaf down in here, all of these leaves right here, I should say, and some of the tulips, I'm able to fit inside of this hooping. You can see very clearly because I have left this bottom triangle. This design is actually a little garden flag, and it's got this pointed end down on the bottom of it. So what I did here is I left those outline stitches here so that I could keep a reference for what direction this design is going to go in. And I was able to rotate the design in my hoop and keeping it centered within my hoop so that I could get the maximum amount of space out of this design. All right, that is my hooping number one. And again, keep in mind what I'm looking at here is I am keeping things dimensionally correct. So the things that are going to be further behind are going to stitch first. If I were to show you over here on my object list, maybe by colors and just rotate it down, these are all applique parts of the design. And over here, you can start to see that some of the stems are going to be stitched. And then eventually we're going to have all the appliques for the tulips themselves. All right, so that's hooping number one. Hooping number two, which I called my right stems that are rotated. Here's my hooping. So look at this funny little flower down here on the bottom. Did you notice? In the left hooping, here was the stem for it, but I could not fit the flower. So it had to come in under the next part of the hooping. You're going to see a lot of stems over here where the flowers weren't going to be able to fit in my hoop. And so I stitched the stems out first. Some of them, this one here is where that real big problem was at. This design right here doesn't show, but I actually redigitized this whole stem when I stitched out my tulip design. All right, so again, with dimension, stitching out things further behind, stitching out things that then came forward in the design. My last hooping, I called it my new top. This was my third version of it. And this is where, again, I had a long stem that I was able to combine together. And then I put in all of the flowers that were going to be on top of these stems over here. All right, so that's how I approach this design. You may wonder what this one is doing here. This was just left there as a placement because it was previously stitched out, I think in this hooping. Yeah, it was stitched out here in this actual hooping. But in this one, I left it there and I just combined all the colors into one color, not meant to be stitched out. But when this template for this design is printed, that would just be one of the ways that I could make sure that my alignment was going really well for this. Same thing with this line right here. This is a line that I wanted to just put in at the very beginning of my stitch sequence right here. And I wanted that there also for alignment purposes. I'm going to come back to these two designs. You can see here that I did digitize myself a yellow placement line right here. If I show just that, let's see, let me show it to you real quickly. Hide unselected. Okay, so you can see here that I digitized this shape here to show that that was where all of the embroidery was going to fit inside of that hooping there. In my first hooping, I also had a placement line, but it wasn't quite as complete. On this one, I had the bottom triangle, and I also had a line. Let's just hide the unselected there so that you can see what I did there. So later on, this line here was going to line up with this line here. So remember, my designs were all placed on angles other than the very top one. And that is how I attacked this process of multi-hooping. I did not use the multi-hooping function here on the program at all. That's got its own issues. Sometimes it works well, sometimes it can cause more problems than what you want. So this is the process. What you want to do is you want to gather all of your designs together and you want to place them into one hooping in your own machine format. Then you're going to start looking at that design. You're going to look at it dimensionally, what things are going to be stitched first, behind, and then figure out what fits inside of your hoop. It really is a rather simple process, but it does take some thinking and some playing around with it. And it really does work quite effectively. Now, another thing I just want to comment on before I close out this video are these are all the quilting stitches here that were in the background of this original design. As you can see, I did not include them when I was actually doing the embroidery on this project. And I had a reason for that. Mainly it was because I was not going to quilt this all in the hoop at that time. I just was concerned about making a panel that had the embroidery designs on it. And so I didn't fuss with all of those quilting stitches on this project. So anyway, this is Favi Martinez, and I just wanted to chat with you a little bit about how I made that multi-hooped tulip project. Hope you learned something. Thanks for watching. Bye bye for now.